Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our first Beach Road Stabilization Project Oversight Committee. And we'll talk about that. And hopefully, the point of this meeting is to identify exactly what that oversight is and a clear picture of where we're going to go. Let's just start off with roll call in the agenda, but let's call it more of an introduction, so we know who everybody is and put a face to the name. Start Peter Mark, City Council member here in Belvedere.
Yeah, and I'm Robert Zedek, City Manager.
Tony Boyds, Public Works Director.
My name is Keith Fagan, I'm a Geisler engineer here again.
John Tanton, I'm a resident of Cove Road.
Patrick Fager, I'm on the Finance Committee.
James Riley, we're Stetson Engineers. William Fulweiler, the Stetson Engineers.
Adrian Cormier, with both on the PMCM side.
And project management construction.
Adrian Cormier, both.
Chris Mary, City Engineer.
We have co-audience here. Feel free to introduce yourself if you like. Don't need to. Larry and Mel. Thank you. So first, responsibility is to identify a chair and a vice chair to manage the meetings. Seeing that this is a resident oversight committee, I think that it should be a resident. So do we have any thoughts, any volunteers? 3 to choose from. So it's the 3 of us who are the very to choose from, yeah. I believe so.
I'm happy volunteer, but it's helpful, but I don't like to do it.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Anyone want to take a vice chair responsibility, fill in when needed, and add additional communication as we go? I can be the vice chair. I think that's okay. I'm happy to do that. Hey, John. John, do you want to take over the? Well, let's all. I'll make a motion to appoint John and as the chair of the subcommittee, myself as vice chair. What on that? 4 members. Aye. I'm good. I'm going to say 4 people. Yes. 4 people. So John, you want to take over and go from there?
Yes. Wing it as I go here.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So the next item is the introductions and opening comments by staff. We've done introductions, I believe, but we haven't really more detailed introductions for the firms present, but I'll maybe let you take that point.
Yeah, again, thanks to everyone who's here today. This is our kickoff meeting to talk about projects, project scope, and design plans. And today also, as well, is to introduce a bit of information about the project budget and how we arrived at some of the numbers. We've got an hour and a half today. I understand some folks have a hard stop at 2:30, so we'll be mindful of that timeline. I also want to remind everyone here that this is a Brown Act meeting, which means it's open to the public, it's being recorded. So just keep that in mind in terms of the comments and the content that we talk about in this public record. The schedule for these meetings looking forward, is something that Tony and we've had some discussions about that, and I think as we get into the topic and talk about the oversight of this committee, what we're going to be focusing on, that might develop a bit. But we did contemplate between 2 and 3 meetings, this being one of them, in the next month or so. And one of the bigger tasks I think that this group could be tasked with was reviewing the actual bids when they come in along with staff. I think that might be a closed session item that we discuss, but it would be helpful for this subcommittee to have a look at which contractors out there, which one. If we have to take a look at the finances for the project overall, we consider if we're scaling back the projects or adding things in, and we also getting that feedback. See, we've already appointed chair and the vice chair, so thank you for volunteering. Tony, do you want to introduce overall a little bit of background? I know the staff report did mention a bit of that, but
Before we jump into the project itself.
Yeah.
Can I, throw a couple thoughts out there and then, I'd love to see if everyone has sort of consensus on this or wants to throw anything else in there. When we, formulated this committee sort of by design, or the design of it originally was to, as I mentioned earlier, a president oversight of this fairly large project. That's a big category. But specifically, it's to review and oversee the project management, not to manage this from a management perspective or take the role of our professionals who are working on it, but to having eyes and ears of the community. That goes both ways, both letting the community know what's happening and hearing from the community what is happening and relaying that to our project team as it goes. We want to ensure transparency on this project, make sure that what is communicated internally by city staff with us is publicly available through meetings like this and described in reports to the council and even anecdotally as you're speaking with people in the community. That's the nature of it. Financial oversight. We've had, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, we've had estimates of this project going forward. And and one of the things we should talk about is, are we just letting this project be a cost that the project ends up being, or are we going to work from a budget and work backwards and address scope or address priorities if in fact those costs change over time? Personally, in the latter camp and focusing it on the project budget as we go and making sure that we keep that as close as possible. Like I said a little bit earlier, being the eyes and ears to the community, communicating that through the means that are necessary, focus the council, the newsletter. This group issued a report to the council, which then gets published at various points of the project. Any thoughts or leave it at that? Yeah, this anything or is there anything that yes, as a group should identify as a goal or priority beyond what I just said.
One thing I think, to your point, you mentioned that the scope of this subcommittee narrowly, we want to review the project plans and the design and the financials. Beyond that, awarding the contract and actually going into construction, I think that's something we need to consider is, do we want this committee to continue to stand these for those meetings, or is it something that, that's now going to be transitioned over to staff? So, I think that was maybe your point, maybe I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I guess my understanding is it's not our job to run a project. It's Tony's with the project management and our selected contractors down the road. But I believe we need to have strategic and important touch points to make sure that at various points, the project management consultants and our city staff, Tony and you, Robert, can let this committee know what's going on and how it's going, and take feedback, input, and suggestions along the way.
I have an idea. What might be good to consider is maybe one of the committee members sitting in on our weekly construction meetings throughout the project, because therefore they're going to get the information as it's being someone handed to us, updates on schedule, overall general project consensus on things from the ground project. So that might be something to consider. And Robert, your point about being continually involved, I think it does make sense as someone who will be impacted by this because I live very near it and our neighbors will all be impacted. I think it makes sense to have communication from the neighbors about how it's impacting us and how it's impacting the users. So, I would support continued involvement.
Just chime in as far as the finance side of things goes. It's, as you'll see here in a minute, we're going to be getting the bids in on March 19th, and that's when we'll see the actual numbers. And if the numbers are higher than we've anticipated, that's definitely when I think there'll be some discussions and some decisions to be made. So that's really the kind of this committee will have time.
Well, I think that was a pretty good introduction. Tony, do you have anything else you want to add in terms of history of the project? Or you want-
I can do that, just from a Brown Act perspective.
Yeah.
We should pause every once in a while for public comment.
Right.
So as we're moving to the update, John is called for public comment and see if anyone wants to say.
Is there any comment from the public?
Anything online?
I do think the introductions is on, I know we did a quick introduction, I think being introduced to the firms that are here in a little more detail and how you have been involved in the role you play, that it's something that would be helpful for me.
So to start off with, our engineering, design and engineering firm is Stetson Engineering. They work for the city for a number of years on studies, assessments, and designs with the sea levy concerns that have been an issue for at least 10, 20 years in the city. So they have a deep knowledge of these missions, and they have been working on this project since about May last year, I think it was. And I've seen the design through to this point, which is the RFP. Last week, the project went out to bid, and we're going to be having there's a couple of other milestones as you see on the way, and there's going to be a bidders meeting and so on. Stetson be involved in that, but they're actually kind of going to be stepping back at this point. We're going to be moving more into construction mode, and that is where plant engineering comes in. And we have Adrian Cormier from Park with us today. He's the on the ground construction manager for the project. He also has a deep history in Belvedere. He's worked with the Lagoon Association, POA, and with the city's 2019 sheet tile installation project in Beach Road. He was on that same project. So his role in the team at this point is to bring in his expertise and move the project to the end of construction. And is there anything else that might have missed on your?
Well, I do want to mention that we also have a couple other firms on our team. We have a surveying firm called Overcamper Associates. They've been doing the project survey. And then a very important team member is Miller Pacific Engineering Group. They're geotechnical engineers, and they took a primary role in the design of the sheet piling itself. We also have BK Cooper, who just came in. Mr. Cooper is a former construction manager for a local large construction company, and he's produced cost estimates. So he was our construction expert as we prepared the design plans. I'm again James Riley with Stetson. I've been involved with the city since about 2010. And our project engineer is Julian Fullwiler, and he'll give you the run through the project details. But Jim Martin, we have an environmental specialist, that's right, who's been getting all the environmental permits. So this project started when I say this project, attention to the city's levees, I call them levees for lack of a better term, Beach Road and San Rafael Avenue. It dates back to about 2010 when FEMA changed their flood maps. And at that point, they did not recognize the effect that those levees have on protecting interior homes from flooding during a coastal event. And all of those homes at that time were then put into the flood zone. There's now about 260 homes in there. Vulnerable to flooding, and FEMA recognizes that. For homes that have federal insured loans, homeowners insurance, flood insurance. That spawned some investigations that the city undertook that were funded by California Department of Water Resources. and FEMA to span several years, looking into the deficiencies with those two levees, deficiencies with respect to lack of adequate height, to be a barrier against the flooding, and also construction deficiencies with respect to how they were built, the materials that they're built of. So at that point, we engaged with Miller Pacific, who walked with us through the next several studies over the years. And those studies yielded initially conceptual design plans of levee improvements to address their structural integrity and also to raise the levees to sufficiently to keep seawater out during our target was a 1% annual chance coastal flood event. As part of that, it became apparent through Miller Pacific's geotechnical engineering analyses that the levees would require important stability measures, because the geotechnical borings revealed that their construction materials of construction were weak soils. They were sitting on weak liquefiable soils and bay muds. So during a strong earthquake, they would deform significantly. So as we move forward, our engineering and design work actually was multi-purpose: strength and stability of the levees, as well as raising them. And when I say raising, I really mean mostly by sea walls. So over the years, there's various efforts, initiatives on the city's part to get it built. Get it funded. And those efforts came up short. But so the result of that was at least to focus on those particular stretches of the levee that really needed immediate attention. And those, the city hired Miller Pacific to do an assessment, and they identified 3 locations, 3 reaches along the Beach Road levee. And those reaches were so close together that it made sense to address those reaches as one continuous project, which is what we have here today. Is the first step in the overall, potentially the overall project, but the first step to address the most urgent and critical needs, which is to strengthen those levees along that 500 reach, protect the levees from further undermining due to erosion. And while we're doing that, install sheet piling to prevent significant deformation and strong seismic shaking. So those are the 3 main objectives we're trying to achieve.
How do they relate to next to China Cabin? There's another stretch that had been worked on.
Right.
How does this relate to that?
It would start at that point and then move. Is that yeah.
Was that project doing something similar?
Yes,
with that stretch?
exactly. Yes.
Okay, so this is just
A continuation. Yeah. Because after that particular project addressed the immediate need at that time, because there was movement observed in that particular length of the seawall. And now, since that time, we've noticed movement in the part of the seawall that we're addressing now. So that we're dealing with those aspects. But an important point is that whatever we're doing, what we did in 2019, what we're doing now, is consistent with the overall plan. So that if the overall plan is ever constructed, we won't have to undo anything to build upon what we're doing. So there's continuity and consistency.
Question.
That was a great history of the effort you guys have gone through. I think you call it the overall plan. I just have one question. How have we been able to do that? Would we have achieved the objective of getting protection so that those homes, 260 homes, would no longer be in floodplain? Would FEMA recognize that?
No, it would not. They would have the effect of real flood protection from a 100-year flood, but administratively, no, because the levees, Beach Road and San Rafael can never be, in FEMA's eyes, what's called credited. And the reason is to get FEMA credit, recognition of the effect, requires that a levee not have any buildings attached to it or infrastructure running through it. It has to be totally engineered levee consisting of fill only without any what they call encroachments. So we went back and forth with people on it. That was ultimately.
And so encroachments would be the house penetration with the yacht club and 30 and places like that.
Places, any attachments to flood conduits, pipes that go through it, pipes that go longitudinally within it convey utilities.
And I would imagine also the uncertainty related to Main Street's elevation and Bushel Road elevation.
Yeah, well, definitely, yeah, but even raising those, you know, it's, FEMA would not accredit, but through these efforts of the overall plan, actually real flood protection could be done.
Can I ask a question about, you said urgent and critical, which I assume comes from the specifics assessment. Can you talk about that? Was there any identification relative to the immediate risk, usable life? Is it an urgent and critical need to fix this ASAP? I know that's an unknowable question. But
Yeah.
I'll still ask it.
Well, and I'll let, we all have kind of heard and discussed this with Miller Pacific, so I'll let others chime in, but as I understand it, you know, there is observable movement occurring, it's measurable. I know Adrian's been involved in that, in the seawall. So based on that, when that is observed, that means it needs to be fixed. Maybe not today, but very, very soon. It can't be, I can't give you a time.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
And to follow, support that, in 2019, our structural analysis for developing the tow protection sheet that was installed, you know, looked at that, you know, component. So it was certainly, we, you know, certainly noticed during our initial observations for the study that the wall was, you know, starting to separate, which prompted.
That's the same bulging out from the sidewalk.
Yeah.
The exterior of the other part.
Yep, and we noticed a settling, a stopping of that particular location, but then that continued to kind of migrate, let's say, as Scott performed surveys after our 2019.
And part of it just, but maybe this would, you might have been saying, in addition, there was erosion that was happening, that was identified.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, there was undermining happening, and that's why the toe protection, you know, the spread footing was starting to become exposed, and that was about the transition point within the elevation of the existing, where the sand line was at, where we started to address the problem. We saw roadway, and it was right in line with where we had a pretty significant crack in the wall.
I guess it wouldn't matter, but are those two different dynamics going on, or are they?
Yeah, well, yeah, the primary dynamic is, it's the root cause is the undermining of the toe. So without the toe, what we see is what's called a rotational failure. The whole wall is moving as one unit. And you can see that in some of the cracks. So measures need to be taken to prevent further undermining of the toe, which is what this project does too. And then strengthen the foundation of the wall so that it doesn't continue to move. And then go deeper with the sheet piling to prevent deformation during a seismic event. So that's kind of what's happening.
And the other component of that too is as the erosion is occurring under the wall, it's actually actively recruiting material from underneath and behind the wall, and pulling it back out, causing the sidewalk to settle. I think there's actually been a project that where they had to repair parts of the sidewalk, and they found large voids in the sidewalk.
Yeah, and I guess the dog pile back on the urgency question that you made, you know, we look at this section of the road as probably the most critical. We're seeing movement in a short amount of time to a wall that's been there for 100 years, right? And that's alarming. That's under static conditions right now. The soil analysis is very obvious that it's built on bay mud using dredge material, it's very liquefiable. So if we have an earthquake, then, a undermined foundation at that spot could really be devastating. You could see the whole wall really collapse. So getting back to urgency, that's why we're focusing here rather than, let's say, San Rafael Avenue or other places in the city where we have said, yeah, we need to do something here soon. So let's focus on Beach Road now.
I will hand it over to Julian, and he's going to step you through the project details, and feel free to ask questions as we go.
Let me know when you want to change screens here.
Yeah, I do notice the plan set up on there is the draft version. Looks like the ones that are printed are final. There's mostly they're the same, except for I think some of the sections have some updates that are a little bit different.
This has some notes on the temporary removals.
This has a-
So what's in the packet is the,
this is the final, right? So,
Well, I think the detail we're gonna see probably more close up here anyway, so where is the difference? Just highlight our attention to our packet.
okay, sure. So I'll walk through the plan set, and then as Tony had mentioned before, this was put out for a public advertisement last Friday on February 20th, and bids are due Thursday, March 19th. And so that's when we'll see proposals from the contractors as well as the cost proposals.
Jim, why don't you just give a quick to the group, why the timing? Because the construction window for work in the water is very limited, so we are moving relatively quickly to get bids and everything back because other people.
Yeah, that's a good point. So there are, because there's work occurring in the regulated waters on the bay side of the flood wall, we have a work window from June 1st through October 31st, during which that work can occur. So that's a 5-month period. However, the estimate for actual construction is a 65-day period within that 5-month window. So we won't have the final construction schedule and exact dates until contract is awarded to the contractor, and that scheduling can occur between the contractor, the city, and Hadley Construction, which we'll probably talk about as well on their role in this. So we wanted to advertise early for a couple reasons. There's the sheet piling is going to be driven with a specialized piece of equipment, a silent driver, which there's limited amounts, and it's been advised to us that advertising this early allows the contractors to identify that equipment and have it reserved, so their projects don't all fill up, and we don't have access to it. And so that's a part of the reason of putting this out early, is to be able to have the contractors identify and reserve the silent driver equipment.
I guess it's specialized. There's not a lot of silent drivers out there.
No,
So we want to get them,
only a couple companies.
dedicated to the project before they get.
But there are local companies within the Bay Area that do have these, possess several of these specific pieces of low motion into these adjacent areas. It's more of a hydraulic press.
Also, one of the benefits of why we're rushing is why we're getting this project out to bid and we want it soon, is because we'd like to award the project as soon as possible. Assuming that the budget comes within budget. Contractors right now are building projects for the summer, and so the longer we wait, the closer we get to summer, the less available they're going to be. They are willing to work on escalating prices, and so it's just something to be mindful of.
How many bids did we request, and how many do we expect?
So, yeah, Tony, you want to talk about that? We don't really request bids so much from specific contractors, but we do reach out to a few. I say that. We don't know how many we're going to receive, but you want to talk a bit about the interest?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a list of contractors, local known contractors. I think there's about 8 of them that we sent out notices to. At the same time, posted on a website that's called BidNet, that's used for these kind of projects, these kind of RFPs. And Chris told me this morning that there had been 25 parties that have downloaded the RFP documents. But of those, a few of those will be other kind of aggregating websites that spread this kind of details. But we think, between 15 and 20.
I've personally been in communication with about 6, 7 that are still very interested. These are contractors that folk routinely deals with. It's so far so good. Including the 2019. Yeah, that's a big. They possess the equipment.
So it's good that there's a lot of interest. Apparently, it appears to be a lot of interest in this project, and that competitive process hopefully helps keep the pricing low. But we won't know how many will bid until we actually receive them.
Just a process question. When we get the bids on the 19th, is that after we can make selection, or is there a lot of negotiation and there's more time before a selection is made, or what's the bids sort of final and we can accept one as is?
Talk about the process.
Well,
The bid opening will look like.
it's a good thing to talk about, actually. Because,
Absolutely.
yeah, the review of the bids, I think, as Robert mentioned, would probably be in a closed session. And the bottom line with the numbers is the most important one. Cost, but in terms of qualifications and other details within each of their bidding schedules, you can start making comparisons and do an assessment.
I assume some combination of Adrian and you are going to vet them before that process.
Absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely. I'm typically on the front lines of bid reviews. Once they have been read publicly, then we go behind closed doors and really start to crunch the analysis. The unit pricing, are they balanced? Do we see costs associated with unknowns? Are they throwing a number here? Are they responsible? And then there's also the administrative component. Have they checked off all their boxes for the bidding procedures? Those are the 2 critical items. And typically I've been more on the front lines of the bid analysis and really reading into the dollars of each of these units.
So if that process begins on the 19th.
Yeah, I strongly urge that. Yeah, if possible.
And I assume a shortlist recommendation or a ranking of some sorts will be prepared for you guys. Is that when we get together for a discussion? Because I don't know there's much value in us digging into those. I mean, at 10 we will, but I mean, yeah, it seems like your guys' evaluation and recommendation and prioritizing however you want to do it, eliminating.
And I also don't want to preclude BK with this process here, because the opinion of cost that is generated, and of course, I rely on his vast knowledge and experience and history as a instrumental player for that analysis and how reading into it.
But I assume there's some timeline, so we get them on the 19th by some date, May 1st or 15th. There'd be some time frame during which we would primarily evaluate them and decide and accept.
I think the initial analysis should be a relatively short turnaround, provided our team can assemble, and then we can, and circle back. I would say, I mean, it's usually folk does it in like 4 days. And it depends on the project, too. So,
I think
and like
tentative-
backing into council, approvals. And so forth.
I think the tentative date is March 25th for the subcommittee.
Yeah. And so our role would be to just look at a few down-selected ones in that meeting, rather than the whole.
Correct. Yeah, we're going to go through the kind of the meeting process and fine tune based on many parameters, again, from the administrative side, as well as previous performance and their unit pricing.
Yes, and I would imagine in that meeting, we get time to present that to you, to the committee, and, you know, provide the reasoning.
And we should be able to provide a breakdown in kind of grading, you know, there's a number 1, 2, 3 at a minimum. We'll see how the bids come in, you know. If they're really close, that's gonna be, you know, it makes it even a little bit more tricky. So, we'll see. So, yeah, but I feel we could certainly get information out ahead of the 25th, as even if it's under for draft for review for the, just so they can start to look at it. But yeah, it's certainly a review level of this is our recommendations and observations through the bid process.
You know, could also be a committee member.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Yeah, yeah, just so you can throughout the process of how we're doing this analysis, especially for the transparency. If our numbers come in higher, we still feel they're, you know, justified based on current construction costs. And, you know.
I think we're going to go through our plans in more detail. Is that right? Are there any public comments? One last thing to add. Is the council meeting of April the 11th, I think it is, or 13th maybe, is what we're aiming for 2 or more new contracts. So, contract, and that's yeah. So that will be this committee then would make the recommendations to city council for city council action.
So that should.
I'm sorry,
No, that's your.
That's your concern.
I'm sure at that level, it's guidance to staff and contract will come back.
So usually, but, you know, what we would be seeking at the April meeting is actually.
Oh, the contract itself.
So we have the resolution drafted, city council would come. So the contractor can start planning.
Right, that's a lot to get done, right, in April, so you're assuming, March 25th. That's actually our first look at it. I would map that out and, you know, get meetings on the books. I mean, follow up, because that's gonna be.
I think that's one thing we should discuss today.
Jump back into the plans.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll probably skip the sheet 3, which is project overview, and kind of outlines the main components of the project. The blue lines are the proposed locations of the sheet piling. There's 2 alignments. Alignment A is the sheet piling that's going to be on the base side of the existing concrete seawall. That is the majority of the sheet piling work. There's also one section, alignment B, which is sheet piling in the Beach Road roadway. The reason for that location is that the 3038 Beach Road building is right up against the seawall and doesn't provide an opportunity for installing sheet piling on the base side, the outside of the wall. Access issues for which part of it? We're talking about middle of the roadway. About 2 or 3 feet, 2 feet off the curb. So if we want to jump to sheet 4, this kind of identifies the construction management and closures during construction that we anticipate. So the south lane of Beach Road will be closed temporarily during construction working hours. That's the area shaded in red. That's to allow the equipment, the pile driving equipment, and any support equipment like excavator with cranes that need to move the sheet piling around, have access to get them to the pile driving machine, which is going to be wider than the sidewalk will allow, so it will extend into the roadway. So for safety reasons, that needs to be closed. The north lane, requiring the contractor to keep that north lane open at all times. And so during the construction hours, there will be traffic control to allow for two-way traffic in the north lane.
Bill, you mentioned the equipment once again. Is that, are we using that silent press for everything, or only the piles that are adjacent to a property?
The silent press is required for the entire project. The exception is that in order to use the silent press, it does require initial reactionary piles be installed with the vibratory hammer. So the vibratory hammer will install, I think, 2 to 3 sheets initially, and then the silent driver can run along the top of those sheets and use them as the reaction to push the new piles into the ground. So we do require the vibratory hammer is a little bit more impactful in terms of vibrations and noise.
So piles are round or another.
They're steel sheet piles.
So
They're
they're all sheet, but
They're all sheet.
some go deeper with a vibration and then those go on top of them, or they apologize.
No, that's questions. They're all going to be installed to the same final depth. They have the same length associated with them. It's a different piece of machinery that installs them. So one's a vibratory hammer that kind of vibrates and it shakes the sheet piles into the ground. Once you have 3 of them, the silent driver kind of runs on the top of it. It's like a hydraulic press. It's pushing them into the
So
ground.
it holds on to what's already been.
Correct, yeah,
Yeah.
you need to place the equipment on the reaction sheets, and then you can start your production advance. So we were very successful with using a low moment vibratory hammer during the 2019 repair. Within 20 feet of the China cabin, I was literally inside the China cabin with the representative during those initial sheets, and we did not see any sort of issues at that time, 2019, with the China cabin. So with the combination and pairing and the minimal amount of the vibratory required for the silent driver, it's a very, very good.
The silent driver will you're limiting the vibratory impacts, but also is it silent pod free? Is it quiet, or is it gonna have some noise?
It's not silent, but it's much more silent than the Go ahead.
Well, it runs on a power pack. It's a little crawler machine that would be in the street walking along.
Mhm.
But when it's pushing hard, it makes a,
Yeah, 90
it's
Celsius.
pushing hard.
Yeah, 90 plus Celsius. So hearing protection is required typically within the 20.
I think I'd like to add one part here. It's important to do a pre-examination of inside and outside of all the structures. So there is a baseline. Sometimes people say, oh my gosh, it's done something damage. So it'll be a baseline video taken inside out.
Tony and I have spoken in depth about our existing condition survey, who's going to be a part of it, who's going to acknowledge it, and how we use that as a reference for post-construction observations and any issues that may or may not occur. Also, creating a sphere at which this assessment will be done. So we don't want someone outside of that sphere to say, oh, hey,
Have we had any communications with immediate property owners there? I don't know if you said that. Independence or
Not directly with tenants, no. We have worked with the land company a few times since last year, just keeping them appraised of progress with the project. And then this week, yesterday, with the new owners, there's been a change of ownership for 2 of the properties there. So we met with them and discussed the project. It's not all like
within the lake. Family.
Correct, yeah.
Family members, yeah. They split it up.
Like people in the Strauss group, I don't know if that's technically their. So there are 3 parcels in total, one of them is now owned by the land company, Lot 1 LLC and Lot 2 LLC. The other 2 parcels.
So it's a good question. A big component of this project is going to be communication and outreach to the residents and question when it's the right. Might be not the right setting to have them come, invite them to come to these meetings. We can figure out them what's, and we know that we have a contract yet. Best practice is to wait till we know we have a contract and we work with city council. Then we can start our outreach and we can start shopping meetings or we bring like the public and specifically ask for these surrounding budgets.
Is there any consideration for residents on the northern side of the river? Is there a risk?
I don't, so that's a good question. And it's also a good time to say why we're using the Sonic driver. And it's because of the EIR. So the EIR document that was put together. In that document, the city commits to having a geotechnical engineer produce a report before construction to evaluate whether some needs to be used. And that's being completed and that's how we arrived at where we are.
On the budget plan,
Yes.
it hasn't been used.
Yes, yeah, right, and there was a question at one point for, about how close to the buildings, maybe it was only needed for, work that was really close to these buildings. But as far as buildings on the other side of the road, the north side, I don't think that's being included in consideration, they're not as close as these ones. So I would imagine that, the silent driver being the most sensitive piece of equipment available, would cover that base for those residents too. But
And you, Adrian, and Tony, you talked about that's going to become an us issue. I mean, we're not asking our contractor to do the evaluation and get developments. We're going to do it as a city,
Yeah, well, we haven't asked the contractor in the bidding process to conduct any of that work. But I wouldn't ask them.
well, the reason I'm asking that is because since the issue is mostly about recording reconstruction conditions and getting acknowledgement, wouldn't we, in a sense, heighten our risk by not going to them and getting that documented and acknowledged? Because someone can after the fact show us cracks and problems. And if it's a matter of us doing it, wouldn't it be better to cast a wider net from just a protection perspective?
Without a doubt, there will be a perceived issue with people.
Yeah.
Not necessarily an issue, but perceived. Yes. I recommend you definitely engage that.
Especially since it's, I mean, cost is all cost, but it's not adding to the contractor cost. If you do it, should evaluate the cost, but it's more reasonable.
And at that magnitude, this may be something that warranted to be outsourced into a third party that is also shouldering the risk. I don't know if we want the city's staff or the city to bear that responsibility of making those assessments. It would be, that's just a thought. It all depends on the, as we start to include this in also more residential areas, that just really changes the scope of the.
We can put on the back burner, but
I think they make some very good points on casting of water.
yeah, I think we need to be, at least the recommendation you make, let this group sort of confirm that ultimately, whether we agree with that or not. But I would think a wider net is a valuable consideration.
We looked at it a little differently too, where Bayside building, if we want a pretty detailed video survey, we're gonna be installing sheet piles right adjacent to them essentially, and so that might be a more exterior and interior survey, whereas across the street it is further away, maybe that could be a more of an exterior, potentially only.
And it would
type
sound
of survey.
as well, yeah. And I think the geotech may want to weigh in on where this sphere, this is our critical sphere where we need, 110% coverage on our observations.
Are you gonna have, real-time monitoring?
Good question. I think that it's, as far as instrumentation, I don't think that is currently in play.
It is.
Or is it? I'm sorry. my
On
bad.
contract.
It is wonderful, great.
Contract required.
Great. So we will document that and maintain.
I think that's those at various points so that you can say, during installation hours, it never, vibration never exceeded X, can always never exceed Y.
I will probably have that or request that as one of our weekly topics that we discuss. Has there been any changes? No? Great, move on.
In regards to the buffer area, Scott's identified that as 50 feet.
Oh, wonderful, great, yeah, so Scott's, Miller Pacific has already identified that. Something to work with. That. Yeah, so it's-
With the silent driver, even the back before, there's no other way to get the sheet. So. Not like, okay, it's not gonna work, let's do something different. Silent driver with the vibratory is the best they got going to get the sheets to where they will do what they're supposed to do.
Okay, other points just on this sheet, is the sidewalk and the parking lanes are gonna be closed for the duration of construction for contractor use, staging of equipment, and for the active installation. They're gonna need that space. We don't wanna run into a situation where car gets left overnight, causes a lot of delays. And then I'll talk about it here on this sheet of, one of the components of this project is the two Bayside buildings that are offset from the seawall. 16 to 20 Beach Road is one, and the other one's 22 to 28 Beach Road. Those two buildings are accessed by 4 gangways. We refer to them as gangways in this plan set, in these documents. To allow for the continuous installation of the sheet piling, 3 of those gangways are proposed to be temporarily removed during construction to allow the sheet piles, to be able to drive the sheet piles in those locations. And so that will be an impact on the residents of those 2 buildings. The 4th gangway, the furthest one to the west, is going to be remain open at all times during construction. That's a requirement by the contractor, as well as that sidewalk area in front of that gangway, in front of the 3038 Beach Road building. So that will be the access point for the residents of those 2 buildings. Is that 4th gangway?
Can I ask a quick question about access rights? And it looks like certainly the line in A is being installed in private property. Yeah, what's our rights, or what's our ability to do so, and what kind of acknowledgement is necessary?
Well, we will need permission to do the work, and we working with the city attorney, and we're going to be working with Overcamper, who surveyor, to describe the details needed for a temporary construction easement, and possibly a continuous maintenance easement after that.
Have we had any feedback from the property owners?
From the land company was very receptive. The new owners have taken in the information that we've given them yesterday. Actually, in the process of, for one of our permitting requirements, we need to have a letter of
case scenario, our alternative would only really be relative to 2016, 22, and 28 Beach Road, because everything else is ours, right? And 30, 38, you're in our right of way. So, the worst case is the alignment A along the private property on Beach Road, 22 to 20. Those two properties we have to move in the street as well. So I'm not saying that's not a good choice. But
Yeah, and also just to clarify too, the sheet piling that's gonna be in the street, in the roadway, will require structural connections from the sheet piling to the back of the concrete wall, which is in the private property. So there will be work, even with the sheet piling in the public right of way, there will be work on the private property.
So, I understand what you're talking about. You're talking about the space in front of 2016 to 24, 28, is that what you mean, private property that we're looking at?
Yeah, and you can see it a little better on sheets 5 and 6, which are detailed sheets. Sheet 5 is the project area towards the west, and sheet 6 is towards the east. The property boundaries, you can find them. They're a little difficult. They're single long lines with two smaller dashes, and if you trace it, you can see they extend into the sidewalk on the northern end of the parcels.
So on sheet 6, the westernmost portion of that alignment B, line A, it's in their property. That's the risk I've identified. But even if we move it into the streets, the project would be incomplete unless you tied it to the existing wall.
Yeah, and if you look at sheet 5, there's some red lines, and those will be concrete beams that will connect the sheet piling to the wall.
I think it's important to point out, though, that the sheet piles also provide a barrier against wave action that undermines.
Yeah.
So even by moving the sheet piles into the street, we still have to figure out a way to protect further undermining, and that is that requires more permitting, because put in maybe concrete or riprap or some kind of.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting any property owner would stand in the way of this. It just might be time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not ideal to set up a meeting with property owners and
But I think we have to move all based on that.
Yes.
We don't want it back to have everybody else lined up and some property owners not going to sign it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, as far as how our meeting went, I think it's a lot of them mistaken. They were aware of the project, but they hadn't seen any of the details. The sort of questions about one of the things that stand out to me is that they would like to actually move their property lines so that this just belongs to the city, dedicate that section to the city. There would still need to be an insurance, but
Let's move on that, and if you need, whether it's the mayor or me from the council to join you, please let's get that going.
thank you.
So if we keep going on the plans, into sheet 7, which shows the what the section details look like. On the left-hand side is sort of the typical installation. So you can see the existing concrete seawall, and it's got a little footing at the base of the wall. The sheet piling is going to be driven right adjacent to that footing in a similar fashion as what you can observe in the 2019 sheets that are out there right now. On the right-hand side,
Can I answer your question? Yeah, that on the left-hand side. I'm curious if the existing seawall is rotating out. Why wouldn't the top of the new sheet piles be at the same level as the 2019 to support that? It looks like you're just tying it in with a foot. There's not much resistance to that location. Is that curious, why wouldn't you raise it up to the existing?
I don't know if you want to speak to, I think Scott Stevens relayed a lot of information on the center point of the rotation on the toe protection is about 10, 15 feet below the sand line, the current elevation. So that's, yeah, so having the top of sheet is more getting the tip elevation, the bottom of the sheet, over where the edge is.
I think the one way to look at it is with the sheet pile connected to the footing like that, it all becomes one unit. So if you think back, with the sheet piling going down 40 feet, that whole unit now cannot rotate. It doesn't need to go any higher because you've now added 30, 40 feet of depth to that one unit.
That presumes, say that word thing, sorry, that the existing wall above that footing connection is.
Yeah, and based on the assessment that they did for the city of 2023, it is, what the problem is the rotation. So we're addressing the rotation. Now, that said, all walls have themselves have a useful life. So at some point in the future, that wall will need to be addressed. But right now, the immediate need is to stop the rotation.
Well, my understanding, I think I'm repeating what you said earlier, but my understanding is that pile being driven and locked in at that anchor point, footing base becomes itself a foundation for future work.
Exactly. So you just build on top.
And that was similar to the intent with the 2019 repair, is that we could eventually build on that to achieve the flood control for that event of the storm, the 100-year surge. You have the wind push it over the top of that, for the especially the open section.
So the reason I'm hearing that they're not gonna leave the top of the sheet pile even with the existing 29, because we're gonna get them deeper. Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's not, the reason is it's not necessary to go higher. And the agencies want you to minimize how high you go. Because they consider that volume, what they call fill. And any additional volume that you put higher than you need to, you have to mitigate for. So we're going only as high as necessary to achieve what we're trying to achieve.
Sheet pile below ground is considered fill as well. So that's why we don't need that.
So backing up a little bit, why did we go so high on 21? Because I'm trying to aesthetically, it's gonna look kind of water sides.
Well, currently the 2019 repair has 2 different elevations as well.
Yeah.
There's different foundation details in the old wall, which is why the alignment is a little bit off when you look down, sight down it. So you had, just one of the design features that they had to design around. It's unfortunately a straight line. You get too far off the wall, and I have to leave that whole pattern and the anchor points, and become, structurally, you don't do the job if you set it too far outward.
The other observation I mentioned that the other night at the city council was seeing wave action there, and the way that 2019 works, it seems to break the waves, the reflection back and the wave building. Like, it seems like that was maybe a chance that it worked out that way. It seemed like a benefit.
It certainly helps. However, the intent of the 2019 project was to stabilize the toe, and I believe the emphasis of this particular scope of this project is to increase that same toe protection footprint and not fully addressing the wind wave, storm events.
I know that we addressed this right after the Belvedere city limits, but then nothing happens at the Tiburon side. Is that because there's something different going on with the rotation and strength of the wall, or is that strictly because that's all it's a problem on the Tiburon side?
I don't believe Scott assessed the Tiburon side. It's just the Belvedere side. I'm not aware of it.
The bridge. The wall actually ends there.
Yeah.
It's technically a bridge out of the 30-foot long concrete bridge. On the line, on the jurisdiction line. are pursuing bond funding to do some work on that bridge. Separately. That will make this structurally different.
They've also inquired with us, of course, to find out the detail that we're gonna be using. I think they may be contemplating something in the future. So I don't think that the timelines for the two projects are gonna align. We're not going to use our contract at the same time.
It seems like there's, little scale, but 5 to 10 feet, 5 feet or so, unprotected there at the end. John's getting at. Is it worthwhile talking to them just about? And I know we're stopping at our property line, but our property line is short of the road. Sets right, bottom right hand corner.
Yeah, it is gonna be a little short from the bridge. It's close, but I think you're,
Is
you're
that
pretty
undermining
accurate
our
about
design intent?
5 to 10.
So I also think the radius of that section of wall may have some additional, that maybe some of them might be more of a Scott question, or I don't know, speak to that entirely, but I know once you take a corner, some of the dynamics do change.
You also see there's more, the elevation of the beach is a lot higher than you can see on the contours there, so there is more, we know there's less sort of erosion occurring right in the corner.
Property boundary as well. You can see that.
No, I see that, and we're stopping at property boundary, but if there is any diminution, lessening of design intent, because there is a 6 or 8 foot stretch unprotected before it gets to the bridge, would we want to address that, and instead of arbitrarily, not arbitrarily, but for good reason, stopping at our city border?
Yeah.
Approximately about 2 more feet of cover at that end.
We can pick up on sheet 7 again. I'll just point out the detail on the right-hand side is the alignment B connection. So this is the sheet piling that's going to be driven in the roadside, which is about 2 feet off of the existing sidewalk curb and about 10 feet away from the building. And then the contractor is going to be required to connect with a concrete beam between the new sheet piling and the back of the seawall. So that's going to require excavating down about 3 feet in the sidewalk every couple feet, trenching down and installing that concrete beam.
Those sheets are, I'm seeing the left side of that drawing, are driven down deep, and you've got that reinforced beam going over to the foundation.
Over to the seawall, and that's, yeah,
It
again,
also has that.
right, so the concrete beam is going to hold the wall and prevent that lateral rotation that we've been discussing. But because we're so far away in the sheet piling, we didn't want that concrete beam to hold all of the vertical loads, and so that's a helical pile they'll put under there, and that has a lot of capacity to hold the vertical loads. So that's going to support the beams, which in turn are going to support the seawall. So it's holding it. The beam is holding it laterally. The helical pile is holding it in place vertically.
I'm sure there's lots of logic behind this. But the sheet pile much closer to the existing concrete seawall or the foundation of the building, would that eliminate a lot of that lateral structural need?
That's preferred, and then there's offset requirements just to allow the equipment itself to have space in the building to be driving that. We can't really physically, we can't get within 5 or 6 feet. Just having a little bit of space for protection. We don't want to be. But yes, closer structurally is better, which is another reason why the alignment A functions a little bit better.
Excavate down to the bottom of the channel
you're showing where that green, that's the channel.
Yeah, so that'll, yeah, that's gonna be excavated down underneath the sidewalk about 3 feet to the top, and then they'll have to go down another 1.5 to the beam.
How about below that, because you're showing a channel with bolts going into the wall, well below that.
Yes, to install the angle iron, they'll have to dig a little section down
All the way
below.
down.
Yeah.
Is there any, this, sheet eight here, June,
This is just the specialty details that apply to the 3 areas under the gangways. 3 of the gangways are going to be temporarily removed. There's limited space between, those gangways are supported on kind of large concrete piers. There's limited space between the concrete piers and the footing, and so we're using a narrower sheet pile for those sections to fit in there. That's what this detail is. Additionally, because those sheet piles are going to be installed so close to those concrete piers, we're going to put 3 helical anchors on the existing gangway piers to make sure there's no issues with that pier footing as the sheet piles are being installed. Sheet 9 is information about the utilities. This one's a little complicated. There's a lot of work that's actually going to be occurring ahead of construction. We've been working with the city and PG&E on a relocation plan for several of the gas and electric laterals that are serving those Bayside buildings to prevent issues during construction. PG is actually going to relocate several of the gas and 2 of the gas laterals and 1 of the electric laterals in a joint trench. That work, we're trying to pin them down on exactly when that work's going to occur. The idea is definitely to have it before June. They've said that's doable. That said, we don't have those dates yet, and hopefully we can get that work done with them the contractor will still have to work with the water line and the sewer line, serving 3038 Beach Road. The water line will need a temporary service connection that MMWB will install for continued water service while that lateral is disconnected. The sewer lateral, the contractor will disconnect that and reinstall it in 1 day later that day. And then we have identified on this plan work by others, which is the work associated with the 3 gangways and utility laterals that run along those gangways. So that is going to be work by others, not the prime contractor that this contractor is going to get the bid for. The city is negotiating with local contractor Hadley Construction to do that work. The reason this has been separated from the main contract and identified as work by others is they have sort of local experience with these specific gangways and utility laterals. Actually, they've worked with the Belvedere Land Company recently, maybe 2 years ago, actually redoing a lot of the utilities underneath the buildings and repairing those gangways. So they have sort of a local knowledge on exactly how they're connected and put together. And by contracting separately with Hadley or another potential contractor, if those negotiations don't ultimately develop in the way we expect, that allows also the separate contractor to negotiate and work with PG&E to figure out the temporary service for those 2 buildings, which is actually ongoing. So Hadley's met with PG&E and sort of figured out a temporary electrical service connection for the 2 buildings set up ahead of time before the contractor comes in. Disconnect everything.
Hadley went through all of this a couple of years ago. There's a lot to this. So they have this special knowledge. They've worked with the property owner and the tenants before. So they've been through this drill before. So that's why we've recommended that bring Hadley on for this. They've done it before. It will minimize problem.
Yesterday, one of the sewer lines was out of compliance. Totally required because of the ownership issues with the land. So yesterday we had. Today they finished checking it. It's broken nice.
Yeah, that's why we want someone who's done it before.
Sorry, which of the gangways is staying?
Gangway number 4, which is the left of the plans or west. So that's the one closest to the other 30. And so that's where residents will have access to both buildings. And at this point, the preliminary plan that Hadley and PG have arranged for electric temporary service is that that service will run anyway.
It makes sense to, while they're doing this, consolidate all the utilities in one gangway. Is that not feasible?
I think that is partly what they're doing.
Consolidating as best they can, yeah.
Yeah.
That's feasible based on what they're doing.
Yeah, but I think sewer and water and gas, just because of it's 100 feet away from the canyon. Actually, it's easier to set up a different.
Rob, you were pointing earlier that informing the neighborhood actual project is accepted, makes sense. Although for these, it's like 8 or 10 units in these 3 or 4 buildings, I wonder if you might want to let them know sooner, just so they don't, come across it in the park or something. I feel like these people will be particularly disrupted. Other people across the road or in the neighborhood. I don't know if you have any plans for that, because everyone's kind of in the same communication.
Well, we have the owners of those buildings. Maybe that's the route we could
Right. Something the owners could give to the tenants.
And maybe it's just a worksheet that's got some dates and facts.
A reference to these materials online, it's a simple thing.
That's a good.
We have about 10 minutes left. We do want to talk about dates. Is that, have we covered the plans?
I think that's, there's one more sheet that just, the final sheet just has a, you can see the profile of the new steep piling, top elevation. They compare the top elevations of the railings and the existing 2019 sheets are the green on the left-hand side. So those are the final elevations that will be installed by the contractor.
We are going to install a layer embed in the concrete on the sheet piles that we're revealing, a layer of sand. So when you look down, you won't see the white concrete, you'll see sand. And since they'll be little over, they will be probably completely covered with barnacles and sea levels. So it'll look more naturalistic.
Okay. Oh, actually, I did, well, let's talk about dates. I had one question about the budget. So I saw the number of the estimate was 3.5 million. Peter, has that money, has the city council set aside money? Is that available?
Yeah, quick talk on that. As James talked about this in his introduction, this has been part of the broader perspective on Beach Road and Centerville Avenue as well. We hope to raise through bond measures significantly more than this project itself, but this is an offshoot of, as we talked about, the urgency and critical nature of this improvement. So what we've been doing for the last couple of years is, in a sense, squirreling away money from excess reserves, and Patrick knows it very well, whenever we have the opportunity through budget surpluses or improvements on performance relative to revenue or expenditures, we put money away into the infrastructure fund, which with contributions in 26 and 27, we'll have enough money, $4.68, I believe, $1 million overall, which is a lot more than just this contract, but it includes the project management, and a lot of other things that we're talking about, to cover this. So we have adequate resources for this at this point in time, hence my concern earlier about budget creep and surpassing what we have currently expected, because that's the money we have at this point in time. Short of that, we'll be actually diminishing services or other things able to project beyond what we've reserved at this point.
But 4.6 is approximately the reserve available.
That's what we have at our critical infrastructure.
Yeah, and I can just run through this really, which is how the funds breaks down for the design engineering equipment. So 290,000. SEQA assessment, the components for EIRs, it's kind of a placeholder. That's needed. Land surveying and mapping, permitting fees, environmental mitigation costs, construction management, contingency for those long construction services, so about 770,000. And then the construction, the estimate at this point is still just under 3.5. So 3.5. For a total of, yeah.
And two suggestions. One is I will show this in the future with not only estimated cost, but expenditure state, you know, the balance in there. Because clearly some, and people table we already spent some of this money. You know, happily so. I put it that way. And just another question: where is your work by others in this? Happily so.
That is within the construction. Right, yeah, and we can certainly email the details.
Sounds like the dates are an important thing to get on our.
So,
You mentioned the date of March 25th. Is that a firm meeting date?
yeah, so looking, remind me again, Tony, we're going to opening on March 20th.
Sorry, and I misspoke, it was actually not for the fifth, it's the 10th.
Okay.
So that's only 2 business days for you guys.
So I think that's what we should think about, is how much time do we need? There's 2 parts that I see. We receive the bids, and then internally we review those and put together a bid tabulation. Put together bid tabulation, my thinking is that we distribute that to the subcommittee members so that they can review it. And while that's being reviewed, we at the same time are doing all of our due diligence. What Adrian was talking about, kind of bigger picture, putting together that package, which would then be presented at the next subcommittee. And that's the question now, is like to have that, and how much time do we need that report for the subcommittee? Keep in mind that at least 24 hours to them.
Yeah, I think the bid analysis side, again, being one of the 2 components, because we still have all of the administrative, which I'm impression that the city is going to, you know, right, as or are you expecting both to review all of the administrative, we can talk about that. But duly, collectively, both of those items need to be thoroughly vetted through all of the things. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it depends on, it's doable, it's just about, I think, about how much time per day can be spent on this. for me personally, this will be a critical path project for as far as availability, given the where we're at with the bid procedures, typically in August. From my own perspective, so usually the bid analysis, depending on how many bids we get, but there's not a lot of bid items. It's usually I probably have a good understanding. Yeah, it really doesn't take too much.
So to that point, if we wanted to schedule a meeting or perhaps the 25th or the 26th.
Yeah, I think that's completely reasonable. In my opinion.
The 26th is exactly 4 weeks from today, I exactly do the same time, if that possibly works. Want to propose that?
Yes. 90 minutes is adequate time for that, or do you?
I think probably an hour to an hour and a half.
Yeah, I would say-
Both sides, yes.
If you keep it the same, but we'll probably get, it's going to be again more of a review, how we got to the, say, top three, final three.
And then any meeting, that's our next meeting, and beyond that, we'll schedule at that time.
Yeah, I think, yeah, after that meeting, we can reassess what do we need to get discussion topics. So we can go with.
So March 26th, Thursday, 1 p.m. to basically, and hopefully we'll get on Tuesday or so your tabulation breakdown. Look through your guys' analysis of the bid figures.
Yeah, I mean, right on, once the bids are read, we'll know where we stand, on, the low, let's say the lowest responsible, where that pairs with the opinion of cost, and then, kind of go from there. And then also we'll kind of weigh in how much analysis several of the bids make, and we may just not even book it, a couple of them. So that kind of depends.
Just out of curiosity, how's everyone's availability on the 25th? Or Monday? Let's say at the same time, 1 o'clock. I know, Tony, it sounds like you might have a conflict on the 26th.
Yeah, I won't be here.
26th.
Maybe move to the
I
25th.
designed it, I designed it. Come on, be honest.
Sounds like there's no objection to the 25th.
It's a process and
Yeah, no, it's fine.
All right, thank you.
Before we adjourn, any other comments from the public?
I would just urge you guys, it sounds back to the height of the final. But what is the trade-off? I mean, I understand that's more, if we keep it at the same elevation of 2019, it means more fill. What's the significance of that? And what's the cost? And what's the benefit? Just wondering if we're short for something that.
This came up at the, and I'll hopefully give a complete layman's answer, and if you guys fill in, yeah. I think it's a couple issues. One, it's the environmental review that we saw didn't go beyond reinforcing the stability of the wall. It wasn't intended to do anything other than that. Any sort of elevation beyond what it is right now is meant to break up waves and reinforce the wall, and ultimately at its extreme, going up even higher, is to prevent flooding of low-lying property. We did not, one from a cost perspective, two from an environmental perspective, did not enter that into the scope. Again, just limited money and limited exposures to environmental mitigation was the going up front.
Larry, is your primary thought there about aesthetics or more function with reflecting waves?
Both, and I'm thinking in my mind, when you got all that equipment, you got everything there, you got the sheet piles are gonna be up, and you're gonna maintain them there until the concrete cures, and then you're gonna cut them off. You're really talking about concrete. And I can't imagine that being very much, and we're there, we're doing it, why not? That's what it said in the description, that, you leave the
We should
piles
just say
up.
filling
The
concrete
to
above.
the level you're gonna cut it off at, so why not, we're gonna lose all you're paying for that steel anyway.
Well, what we're not talking about is the environmental impact, and I think one of the reasons from the permitting agencies, design and structural, is they're saying, hey, you're gonna design a project, make it low impact to the environment.
Yeah, but I'm wondering how strong an issue pushback that really is. And if we were to push them, then we'd be able to get that.
do know from 2019, the ratio for mitigation was 3-1. And again, the entire sheet length, even below the sand line, is included in bay fill. So each lineal foot is, it adds up, and that, I believe, is gonna.
Well, what does that mean? What's the length is your one, what's the mitigation?
That's a good question. So in 2019, we had to do a 3-1 ratio. So what the volume was determined, and then we had to go and remove in kind, like debris from the shoreline of the city of Belvedere. So I went on a bit of a goose chase. You guys have to clean the shoreline in the state, so it was a little hard to find debris. Yeah. So we actually worked with RBRA to find, but we ended up finding a great solution. It turns out now I've got a lot of debris on the beach road. I think we could work with that. But if that is the case,
So we had this slide, though, and clean up.
oh yeah, that was fun. Yeah.
Well, and just add to that, I think what this project design has achieved as far as permitting goes is the agencies have basically given us a 1-to-1 ratio.
And that's great. Yeah.
And the proper reason for that is the sand on the top that's being laid into the concrete and the low.
James and Joey, I'm assuming this isn't your fault. Can you respond to us, maybe if I email or letters point about what are the constraints, what are the real reasons why? We know why we did this, and based on the project. So at this point in time, what are we looking at if we were to, from an aesthetic perspective, rather have the sheet piles be consistent with 2019? What would be involved?
Okay.
More mitigation, obviously. Is there a cost? Is it if you're cutting off higher, is it a real cost differential? Because concrete, but less involved in that. So probably would be a decision, but if you could just be able to get that.
Sure. Yeah.
Thanks, then.
Okay, I think we can adjourn. Well, one thing, just a reminder, we should check online to see if anybody's hands.
Just check to see if anything else came in.
No.
All right, good.
The 26th.
At 1 o'clock.
All right. Tony, would you mind just sending out a note and just summarizing very, very briefly what went on? Not full minutes, but just a quick summary. Just a little. Thank you, John.
Thank you.